so we've done this several times. We try to put together some CIOs from the community, and healthcare being an interesting facet, we decided to invite 3 different people from different perspectives in the healthcare arena. So I'm going to facilitate, but I'm going to let you hear from them, really. I'm going to stay in the background and try to ask the questions and get them to answer your questions. To my left is Kearney. He's the CIO of Navicure, and he's going to have some interesting perspectives from processing claims. Mark Trocino, who's a CIO of DeKalb Medical, so you're going to see somebody from the provider side. And Helen Berg, who works for iHealth Technologies, is the CIO there, and she'll describe what they do. It's kind of an interesting part of the insurance side of things. So you ready to get started?
Yeah.
Okay. Why don't we go around and introduce yourselves, describe your organization, what it does, and then maybe give us one personal fact.
Okay.
Something that they might be interested in hearing.
Okay, my name is Kearney Brasher. I'm the Chief Technology Officer for a company called Navicure up in Swanee. And we are in the revenue cycle management on the provider side, which is a big word for we get the claims paid. We have roughly 30,000 providers on our system. We do about 1 million claims a day, give or take. And we have a remittance match rate somewhere around 99.2%. So we're matching almost every response back to the claim and allowing the physician to make their decisions. We've grown from a pretty small organization in 2001 to a little over 240 people, about 50 million in revenue, and we're doing roughly 220 million claims a year on average. Big Oracle database on the back end for all the data minings, 400 terabytes. We invest about $2 million a year in upgrading it constantly with new technology. And on the front end, on the SaaS side, we're all Java, pretty standard application for claims processing, and then we integrate in through WSDLs and all that type of stuff to a bunch of back-end, seamless processors that want to tie into us as a wholesaler. And an interesting fact, I am a type-rated commercial pilot. And prior to computers, I was a semi-professional bass fisher. This is interesting.
I'm not going to be able to.
Yeah, so that's a worthless fact.
I couldn't top that either.
No.
Mark, why don't you reach?
Mark Trocino, again, I'm the Vice President and Chief Information Officer for the DeKalb Medical Centers. We have 3 hospitals in DeKalb County. We also have about 80, maybe now close to 90 physicians that are actually W-2 employees, and they make up some primary care, so community physicians, primary care, and also some specialty areas, and then the internal hospitalists on the side of the company. So that's the primary business units, or several other business units that we own, and I'm also responsible for automating, but for the most part, it's 3 hospitals and the physician practices. If you ask me if I own technology X or Y or Z, or database X or Y or Z, or virtualization platform X, Y, or Z, the answer is probably yes, 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 and yes. I have 3 data centers in the company. I have 3 hosting data centers throughout the country. I've got just about every networking type of environment you can imagine. And so there you have it. I've been there for 7.5 years. I am not an engineer. I am not a technologist. My undergraduate degree is in pharmacy. I also hold an MBA. But I've been in healthcare for 30 years and in information technology for 26. So I got to grow up while all this stuff was getting invented. So it was easier to learn that way. Interesting fact about me, let's see, 2 weeks from today I'll be leaving for Italy. It will be my 3rd time there in 11 months.
Personal or business?
It's personal.
Okay.
Personal and family. So.
Do you speak the language?
Un po'.
Helen.
Helen. I'm Helen Berg, and I guess I need to tell you about what iHealth Technologies does, but happy to fill in the blanks. We are a clinical research company that's enabled by business analytics. So we're a services company, And we have a little bit akin to what Bernie was saying a minute ago about claim processing. One of our services is we analyze claims for the payers. It's kind of the last step in their process. After they've looked at them, adjudicated them, we look at them. We look at about 40 million claims a month. Well, maybe more than that. Say 40 to 60 million claims a month. We find that our clients adjudicate them properly about 98% of the time. So we're in that 2%. We are a very factual, detail-oriented company. Since, of course, we're looking at a large number of claims, but we're looking for that very small deviation. And in terms of the claim volume, we look at about $70 billion worth of claims a year. So those little percents start to add up after a while. But we also do clinical research, and we've got about 50 MDs, pharmacists, nurses that are part of our staff. We've got about 100 medical coders. We have other lines of business, obviously, than the one I just described, which is why we have such a diverse group of employees. We've got about 1,100 employees, 300 or so that are here in the United States, and the rest are outside the United States. So as we talk more, we'll feel more about that. So I know some of you, I think I read, are from the medical informatics school. So certainly I'm interested to hear also from you. But something about me, it's not very interesting, but I got my master's degree at the Citadel. And a lot of people think that that was in the Corps of Cadets, but I didn't have to be, so I wasn't. We'll leave it at that for now.
So one of the questions that we got was describe some of the current advancements, new technologies, or new application of technologies in your specific domain of expertise, Rick. So what's kind of innovative? What's new? And I'll throw that out. Any one of you can start.
I would say from our side, it's social. It's very much the social aspect of it now. Our marketing guys have made a big push. You're seeing the CRM, the Salesforce, the large applications coming in. It's very much this business reaching out and personalizing the service and having some connection with the end consumer. And mobile has moved in directions that I don't think any of us really anticipated. And the challenge for us, particularly with HIPAA data, which everybody knows about, is what type of information that's relevant to a subscriber, a provider, an inpatient can you provide down to a phone or an iPad that's useful? Everybody wants to be in that space. It's the buzz right now. It's like EMR, this fantasy medical record, right, that we keep talking about for 10 years. But it's not going away.
Are you guys seeing the mobile in your spaces?
Oh, definitely, yeah. But that's not what occupies the majority of my thinking time. Probably right now, the majority of my thinking time is thinking about different data management structures. We definitely have all the kind of traditional oracles of the world and more structured data. But I was reading the other day, I think 90% of the world's information was created in the last 2 years. And 80 to 90% of that is either unstructured or semi-structured. So it's really revolutionizing the industry right now in terms of how to manage that data, how to query that data. I think it's extremely important in healthcare and in medical. You think about doctor's notes, you think about just dictation, all the different ways, and graphic data. And so managing that unstructured data is a lot what I think about, and the different and newer technologies in order to do that. Going beyond the traditional relational database systems, which are now kind of being overtaken a little bit because of this influx of all this new data. We can talk more about that later too, but that's kind of top of mind for me.
Are you starting to implement some of these?
Yeah, we are starting to implement, and we've got a variety of different projects and implementations going on right now. I think that's really exciting in the industry right now, that your application can use all these different data structures and data types, and it's really just phenomenal about the power of some of these. The NoSQL databases in particular is what I'm thinking of, because at least when I grew up, we grew up in the SQL world, and that's the way we think about things. But with all the new data structures, some of them are, the NoSQL ones in particular, are really interesting.
This concept of analytics, I think, it really kind of was a theme for the other two on the panel. I would characterize that being the key new technology as well. But from my perspective, I think it's a little bit different. So in the olden days, analytics worked this way. It was primarily held for the financial side of the business. It was analytics primarily done off GL-related discrete data, and we did kind of rudimentary to intermediary business intelligence analysis off this financial information. Now, if you fast forward to today and 18 months from now, and you consider some of the changes with meaningful use and with healthcare reform, it's important now for us to get to become data analytic wise about the clinical process. So we take care of patients in DeKalb Medical. And that interface between the caregiver and the patient is a complex human interface. And what we're trying to do now is automate that interface. And part of the method for improving that experience for you as a patient or the physician or caregiver as a provider is to be able to collect that information in some semi-standard way and analyze that on the back end for quality, for best practice standards, for Lean Six Sigma type of opportunities. And that is not just a technology challenge, but it's also a work process, workflow, and process improvement and challenge. Some of the newer technologies that are helping with that, are specifically things regarding mobility and the convergence. So for me, mobility isn't just mobility, it's the convergence of data, video, voice on a mobile device at the point where the work is happening. One of the advantages, I think, for us as well is we for years have had islands of storage. We store basic data, discrete data, structured data, unstructured data. But we also store image data like, chest x-rays and CAT scans and these kinds of things. So I've been very excited over the last year and a half about the vendor-neutral archiving type of strategies that are coming out into the storage arena, because they allow us PACS, and so I can take PACS and scan documents and discrete data in one storage container essentially now, and that allows us to run standard queries against all these multiple types of data instead of having separate SANs and NASs across our environment. So I think the reason I bring all that up is because I think there's a technology movement now, as well as a really good focus on what is that human interface between the caregiver and the patient, and how do we collect that information so we can make sense out of it and improve the quality and process.
I want to ask any questions, just one or two, make this a little interactive.
You just mentioned PACS, and I know that's tremendous because that's like the totality of diagnostic imaging. How much do you have to, interact with storing those images or storing that image information? Do any of your companies deal with? Well, I know you're DeKalb Medical, so I'm sure you.
Yeah, I don't deal with it now. I'll let you answer. I mean, one of the other prior companies I worked for, as their CIO, actually developed products for radiologists. So PACS was a huge part of their solution, and it was a really interesting business model. They used a lot of teleradiology, which I think is becoming more and more prevalent, across the globe. To get a second opinion, no matter where you are in the world without having to get on a plane and travel, or just have a radiologist read something in a rural area. A specialist in a city, let's say, that's supporting a rural area. So I've worked a lot with PACS, and I don't work with it right now, but it's certainly a really interesting technology.
So, so PACS is interesting because what picture archiving, this is the concept, right? So CAT scans, MRIs, ultrasounds, cardiac cath images. So you've got two worlds of PACS, right? You have a still image, which is I'm taking an x-ray of your chest. But then you've got the, if you've got coronary artery disease, they go with the cath, they squirt a dye, and they watch your heartbeat, see what the flow of the blood is in the heart. Those are pictures in motion. So you've got, in our PACS systems now, you've got these still pictures and these pictures in motion. But you can't make sense out of that unless you can identify other clinical data, for example, who's the patient, and other things about the patient, blood pressure or other types of things you might need to know, right? So the PACS systems are technically very complicated from the storage and database management perspective. Now, for one of the other complicating things is, so 5 years ago, when there was a 4-slice CT machine, CAT scan machine. Now there's 256-slice machines. Well, I'm on this run rate for my storage utilization on a 4 or 16-slice machine. I turn around one day and they own a 64 or 128 or a 256-slice machine, and my storage curve goes like this. So so there's challenges both at the technical database and analytics layer, the application layer, but also on am I going to run out of storage before my fiscal year is over? So we've been leveraging the cloud for PACS, and our strategy now is we will keep some period of time, 2, 3, 4 years, of the images on site, and then we'll start writing a duplicate and then an overflow out to a cloud somewhere, so that it becomes more of an operating expense instead of an ongoing large capital investment for upgrading this hardware, right? So we've started doing that, and that's kind of broken the logjam to move into cloud-based architectures, primarily currently now for storage, not necessarily for a lot of SaaS apps.
You got a question?
Right, I did. This question is for Helen and maybe for the other two panel members as well. We spend a lot of time in our classes teaching relational databases, and that's the gold standard as of now. What should we do in addition? Because of all the structured data, picture archiving data, SQL and then RDBMS is not really good for those things. What should we add?
Yeah, you should start, relational database is not going anywhere anytime soon, right? But at the same time, you should definitely be teaching the NoSQL databases. And, some of the more popular ones, like Hadoop and others, Cassandra, definitely be teaching that and doing some projects in it. All the companies that I work with are already there. And there's so many little, I hate to call them little, really little, but there's these also ancillary query tools and things like that are popping up around these NoSQL databases. That I would for sure, I don't think that is a fad. I think it's firmly embedded now in industry. And it's still new enough to be a pretty hot skill. And even just having exposure and knowledge about it, I think, helps take you up a little bit if you're a student just coming out.
Sure.
So as the owner of a large Oracle database,
We have large non-SQL databases.
Yeah, there's both.
Yeah.
Companies do both
And
depending
it's,
on what they need, right?
Typically, the challenge for us was almost the transition, from C or C++ to Java. It's somewhat of a mind shift, and if you're indoctrinated in the SQL world, you think very relationally and very structurally, and this field is here, and when you move to an object-oriented or a NoSQL database, you really have to, it's a much different way to lay the data out. And so we have found that actually we hire a pretty significant significant number of grads every year, right, to keep onboarding, just to keep the talent in-house. And they're much more agreeable, much more open-minded to it. It's easy for them, I think, to transition to some of our older guys that have been on we have Oracle DBAs that have 25 years of DBA. They're very stuck in a relationship, a relational world. And as Helen said, I mean, the sheer amount of data that we're now trying to crunch through, I mean, you can buy 2 terabyte drives for your PC, but as you know, on the SAN, 2 terabytes worth of data is $500,000, right, to have any speed or anything to it. So we've had to move a lot of things out as well. We've had to move to these open or these non-SQL databases, as they're called, simply to be able to mine the data. We had queries that ran 48 hours and still couldn't produce any measurable result because you'd have rows with 10 billion, tables with 10 billion rows in it. It's a waste of time to do a query because it's never going to finish. And that's, these new databases have certainly made that open. You just can't move. You have to be cognizant of what you're moving. You can't just insert things like for like, or you're going to have performance that matches.
Thank you.
Yeah, and looking at the in-memory versus the persistence of the data and those requirements, is it things you have to do a lot of writes to, or is it just reading for querying, and that a lot of times will drive you a certain direction? How much consistency do you need? Relational databases are great for the transaction-oriented and maintaining state. But once you get kind of out of that, more into the unstructured world, where you've got to look at documents or doctor's notes or just about anything that's not a row and a column, the newer tools are just much more effective at that, including voice even now. Siri was trying to tell me as I was walking to get here which direction I should go. So,
Well, she made it.
Barely, yeah.
Developing on what Dr. Mishra was talking about, how do you all think you're looking at the EMR to be shared, EHR record to be shared between hospitals? What's the view that you all are having, especially to Dr. Trocino?
Yeah, it's an interesting question. So in order to share data between EMRs, because we know that EMR manufacturer or vendor over here is making their developing their system in a completely different way than the others, right? So from my perspective, there's two kinds of interoperabilities here. There's the syntactic interoperability, meaning what's the syntax of the interface? What is it, HL7? Is it, fill in the blank? But in clinicalness, there's a semantic interoperability that is a huge issue because, like for example, years ago when I first started doing this, we had a physician that would write on the chart CBC, which means a complete blood count. Well, there's several kinds of CBCs, right? One other kind of CBC is a CBC with a differential, or a diff, which is a complete blood count with some little bit more stuff about white blood cells, right? So we had one doctor that wrote CBC, but every nurse and every secretary, everybody knew he really meant CBC with a diff. Well, I mean, we can't do that today, right? That's a gross example, but every problem, every diagnosis, every note that a caregiver does on a patient has to be distilled down into some standard semantic interoperability, and that right now is a huge issue. I mean, we have the HL7 RIM, we have CDA, CCD, we have all these standards. That's just the syntax. That's the empty UPS truck. What we don't have is a decision on what size boxes go in that truck, right? We don't have those kinds of standards. And part of the problem, I think, is that just now since Stage 2 Meaningful Use has this issue been written on paper about get your act together with some standards, right? So there's standards for lab, LOINC, there's standards for pharmacy, RX norm, there's standards for diagnostics, ICD-9, ICD-10, there's standards for observations and notes, SNOMED, but it's a disaster to try to deal with these things. I think that's going to be the biggest issue for pervasive interoperability that we're going to face over, frankly, the next decade.
So just continue. So are you saying that when you implement EHR system, you're not forcing an ICD-9 into the discipline of the physicians putting it in?
ICD-9 is a good example and a bad example. Because everybody's going to do ICD-9 because that's how they get paid.
That's
right?
That's what I'm getting.
Right.
Yeah.
Now, lab coding, you know, it's LOINC coding. Doctors may or may not build that in their EMR. They don't care because they got their list of labs. When they see it printed out, they know what to do. Their phlebotomists know what to do. But now you're going to try to interchange that data with somebody else that may be, you know, putting an English word for a CBC in a different way. So outside of ICD, diagnostic coding, you start getting more and more granular. It gets more and more difficult. Let me give you one just quick example. Drugs, okay? I might take a blood pressure drug that's actually 2 pills smashed into 1 capsule, right? And if I go to the drugstore, I can get it cheaper if I get both those pills separately generic, right? Now, if you're going to transfer my EMR data to all these, which one of those are you going to say I'm on? Am I on 2 separate generic drugs or am I on 1 brand drug, right? So there's a standard called RX norm for that as well. But the adoption of those, and as we know, all standards have variabilities to them. So I think for me, from my perspective and trying to get this stuff to work from a functional perspective, that is, the semantic interoperability is really a huge hurdle.
Thank you. Let's do something here. Let's project out past the next election. 5 years from now, what changes do each one of you see in your business or in this industry at large? Project out. Mobile is now much more prolific, or some of the interoperability problems have been somewhat solved. Project out what you think. You're standing there 5 years from now, you're turning around and saying, boy, this is sure different from 5 years ago. What will be those changes?
I think it's probably, you know, the biggest push is the formation of these ACOs. I think where it's going to be more about the quality of care than the cost of care. I mean, it's always about the cost of care, but the mantra is it's really about the quality of care. So you're going to see more and more data being mined quicker, faster, more thorough to look for patterns and trends, because the margins on each individual claim, and it really is a transaction, it represents a payment to a doctor, keep getting squeezed and squeezed, and the rates are going down and down. They're going to have to, you know, physicians are going to have to see more patients a day. That data is going to have to be faster processed and shipped and paid, and you're going to have any problems with any of those payments notified faster. And as the ACOs really drive into effect and more physicians move over into the hospital side of employment, you're going to see much more pay for performance, and their bonuses and their salaries and their things are going to be tied to their level of performance. And so it's all going to become about, to the original point of chopping through this massive amount of data to find quantitative information that helps you improve patient care. And then on the mobile side, I think, is to tie in. There's this thing where you're trying to tie the patient's outcome into their direct involvement. So if they're on a diet plan, or if they have a heart particular thing, it's to push information to them, to encourage them, to keep reminding them, is to keep them on a medicated plan, because these new organizations have responsibilities for all of their patients. And so they're penalized, and they'll be penalized pretty severely in terms of money, and that's really how you motivate people at some level, if they don't move the care up. So they can't simply just ignore people's bad behavior. They're going to have to address that and ultimately make everybody healthier. I think that's the plan.
Well, I completely agree with what Kearney was saying. We're seeing all of that completely and totally the way you described it. The other thing, and maybe more on the clinical side now, that I think is coming is what's kind of being called in the industry right now is third-generation computing. First generation being tabular, the adding machine. I guess IBM was the first one. And this will come back to IBM because I think they're the ones maybe for marketing purposes that are trying to kind of coin this, but it has a purpose behind it, so we'll let them do their marketing thing. And the second generation being more programming, procedural, the way we talk to computers. We talk to them in their language, and we've invented this abstracted layer of that for programming languages. But the third generation that's getting talked about a lot now is, really the realization of what we used to call more artificial intelligence, or what people are now calling more cognitive computing. And and I'll bring it back to the IBM for a minute, because I'm sure some of you watched or were aware of their Watson computer and how it won the Jeopardy game. And they didn't do that obviously to win Jeopardy. They did that because they see this evolution of how that technology can be used in a lot of different industries. And one of the industries that they're piloting that in right now is oncology. It's at the Sloan Kettering Hospital. Not so much for diagnosis, although that's important too, but the difficult part is actually the treatment plan, because we're all different. We all have our genetic makeups. We respond to this drug more than that one, or we're allergic to this drug, or we have a different blood type, or all the hundreds of thousands of things that I'm sure you can tell us about that make treatment plans unique and that can really affect the outcome of your life. And I think that's just one example of how this new kind of cognitive computing is being used. And the other interesting thing about Watson, I was thinking about it, you were talking a minute ago. It's actually what made me think of it. Because the interesting thing about it was it responded to the English language. We didn't have to write queries in any abstracted language. They worked long and hard to figure out how to make it understand voice and then put that in a context. And I think it leverages so many of the technologies that we deal with, because doctors can't keep up, really. Think of all the research that's constantly being done and how hard it is for them to keep up with all that. And it's a little bit easier for a machine, I think, to keep up with that, as long as the machine knows how to analyze that data correctly. So I think there's a whole wave of things coming around that, and it probably will be after the next election. But I'm really keenly interested in to see where it's going to go. That's just one of the industries that they're piloting in. There's others.
So if I look out 5 years, I think Carney's, his view of what the marketplace is going to do is exactly accurate.
Totally agree with you.
But what's that mean, for technology a little bit? Well, we're not going to be going to seeing the doctor as much as we do. We're going to be getting up in the morning. We're going to be standing on a scale. It's going to be on the network or Bluetooth through our phones.
It's going to be that little Fitbit things telling us we need to go walk another mile, right?
There's going to be, I'm not trying to be gross or anything, but, your analysis is an important diagnostic tool. You'll go to the bathroom in the morning. You'll maybe, flip that little blood pressure thing on your wrist once a week. And this is how we're going to control the cost of care. This is how we're going to manage the population, which is really what we have to do. So I believe that the technologies are going to disengage the doctor from the patient in the traditional way that we're looking at it now. And the technologies are going to be in the middle of our life, collecting information that's important to us for our personal health and transporting that through wireless network, mobility, convergence, big data, NoSQL analysis, this kind of thing to the proper areas. And I think the other thing that's going to do, and I know this is not a technology piece, but I think that's going to begin turning the course of having us as consumers of healthcare take a position of responsibility for our own healthcare as American citizens, which we currently do not do now. And I believe that technology and the fact that it can be more pervasive in its ability to help us communicate asynchronously with our physician will help us change our mentality.
So there's an app for that.
There is. There's a lot
There
of
already
them.
are
Yes,
scales and
yes.
some urinalysis.
A lot of them.
Question. I was at a TAG Mobile Health event a couple of weeks ago, and there was a doctor at that point who talked about, he was really upset that instead of technologists looking at what doctors want and need, why they would come up with these things that we don't need it. And if we can't change the patient's behavior, why are we going to try to push this type of technology on them? And I'm just wondering how you would respond to that type of issue as it relates to technology driving patient care as opposed to technology assisting the doctors driving patient care.
I'm sorry, I would argue that is the technology assisting the doctor. You know, I'm advantaged because I get to hear the viewpoints of physicians on a regular basis. How is that? And you know, there's the full bell curve spectrum of these guys, men and women, doctors out there about this kind of thing. And I don't think we have a choice. You are going to interact more with what we call physician extender, nurse practitioner, physician assistant, these kinds of things, clinical pharmacist. We are all going to be interacting with those people more in the future. And the physician is going to be, I hate to bring it down to this, but a project manager of your healthcare through these surrogates, right? And the technology is just an extension of those surrogates. It's the ability to collect the information at a more appropriate time that's less invasive to my personal life by having to call the doctor, get scheduled for my CAT scan, go in there, wait because there's an emergency, go in late, forget that I was supposed to hydrate before all that, right? I mean, you know, this idea that when you're sick you go to the doctor's office or when you're sick you go to the hospital, that's going to end. The behemoth hospital and doctor office complex, that's going to disintegrate more into how we run the rest of our life, right? You know, you can get a loaf of bread at the gas station now, you know, where, 50 years ago you couldn't do that. I think we're going to see more of these, come to Nordstrom's and buy a pair of shoes and get your mammogram. I know I made a joke out of that, but I think it's the surrogatization of the relationship between the physician. There's no way to stop that. And technology is, I'm sorry to tell them, it's going to enable that process, and it's going to enable us to maintain a level of quality at a cost that's going to be more conducive to your tax wallet.
I like this. You could get a roller burger at the QT
and a cat.
But they know that, it's your cell phone today. They know everything. I mean, it's the same argument that privacy people made about GPS-enabled phones or the cloud. I mean, as part of the shopping experience, as part of using Google, you give up certain, privacy, and you understand that. That's how it works. Healthcare will be no different. And I think the younger generation that's embracing the tablet and texting and is really living on a tablet device, it will just be expected that your medical data and your life history and all that is eventually going to be stored in some device you control.
I hope it is what you said, that the technology is enabling the doctors to extend their services more broadly. And
it was just my prediction.
Well,
yeah.
What was interesting is that was how I responded to the person who put this out on the blog.
Yeah.
Was that you don't fight, and it was a physician. You don't fight the drug company when they give you this list of side effects for these drugs that you're prescribing, and yet you want to control IT and technology to just give you properly working EMR. It's like, that's...
Yeah, they're dinosaurs. I mean, my comment to them is, if everybody thought as conservatively as that, we would all be wearing powdered wigs and ascots to work still. So, I mean, it's going to change.
But you see that with, is that flow progressive, right? You can put the chip in your car, and you can drive around for a month, and they'll analyze your driving, and if you drive better than the average, you get a lower rate. It's going to be the same for healthcare. I don't know that they'll ever penalize you for having a blood sugar count through the roof on your daily, urine analysis device that checks it, but you'll certainly be offered lower rates it's the cash versus credit, right? We can't give you a discount for paying cash, but it's 5 cents more if you want to charge it, type of thing. So I think it's all going to be monetary incentive, and that seems to be what ultimately motivates people, when it starts hitting their pocket.
I saw an HVAC truck on the way to work today, and it says this vehicle is controlled not to go over 65 miles an hour. That's a big sticker on the back. I'm thinking,
Don't get on 285.
no, but don't be beeping at me either, because I can't go any faster than 285. They're controlling the fuel costs through. Very interesting. It's starting to evolve. Let me get a little political for a minute. One of the questions here was, what do you think the impact of the recent elections, and actually we know, so now we know, what do you think the impact is going to be in the next 4 years based on the current elections? It's interesting, you guys asked that question, so I thought I'd tee it up and you can do the follow-ups.
This is just my opinion, so, whatever. There are some parts of healthcare reform that I think are ridiculous. But the concept that somebody could repeal healthcare reform in totality is also ridiculous. And even if they could, they're forgetting the fact that the non-Medicare federal government market has already decided they're doing bundled payment, they're doing quality-based management, they're doing a version of capitation with ACO, and it doesn't matter if we repeal that law. The train has left the station. We have to stop talking about it because we need to convert how we deliver health care, how much we consume regarding costs, and how high the quality is for that cost. We have to deal with that question.
Yeah, I think, it's funny. I think healthcare is, we all want better healthcare and good healthcare, and we want everybody to have it, because as we all know, a lot of people don't have it today. But it seems like one thing we don't ever want to do is pay for it. So I'm anxious to see how this is all going to pan out as these new ACOs and all the changes that are going on now, how that's all going to work. I pay one price for health care. I get it through my employer. My husband pays a different price through his employer. My son and daughter have individual plans, and they pay like 3 times. It's all over the place. I'm not sure how they're ever going to solve it, but it does need to be solved. And I think whatever we're calling it now, it's not Obamacare, the healthcare affordability. Yeah. One of the really good things, I think, is trying to bring healthcare to people, or health insurance, I should say, to people that haven't been able to get it necessarily in the past. How they're going to pay for it, though, is what I'm worried about, really. A lot of people can't afford, the individual plans that my son and daughter have if we didn't help them with them.
That's exactly why the insurance exchanges, if they have, states have 10 days now. The states don't start their own process in 10 days because it's not going to be repealed. The feds would come and create the exchange for each state, which would then enable people to buy individual plans through those insurance exchanges. So it's essentially bringing a whole lot many more people who pay for their plans.
Yeah. I just hope people can't afford to pay for it. That's something that concerns me. Is we all need health care, but it's the prices for it are all over the place.
And I think that it's going to make at least 2 of our companies a lot of money.
On the backs of one of our.
Keep them coming.
I would tell you from a technology, a discipline to be in healthcare, it's not going away. It's not getting easier. I have 18 open positions in my technology group. I can't fill. I have a full press court to recruit. We do all the major universities. We have an almost insatiable appetite for talent.
Would you come to us?
Our company's very proactive in the recruiting. It's a small market that's growing, and it's an opportunity, I think, for the next 10 or 12 years to have a very nice career.
Can you elaborate on why you have 18 positions that you cannot fill, and what needs to be done in order to fill them?
And what salaries are you paying?
Well,
Can I borrow that for a second? I'm just going to borrow that too. One of our questions was this. what are your expectations for CIS majors in health IT? And what roles do you see as you're coming out of either an undergraduate or graduate? What roles do you guys see that will they'll lay claim on? What are you going to be hiring for? So can I broaden that? Is that okay?
Let's start with the 18.
That kind of varies all the way from help
Go from
desk
there.
up to directors, right? Again, we recruit from the university side, from Georgia State, Georgia Tech, and pretty heavily. We actually recruit for some of the magnet, the charter schools in Gwinnett. They have some pretty remarkable high school programs, surprisingly really remarkable. Our challenge is leadership, and when I look at candidates coming in, that's the first year, that's what I'm looking for. Do they have the potential to grow into a leadership position? That is my number one weakness that keeps me from being able to grow my business, is because I simply can't delegate enough. And they're very hard to find. And most of our best leaders of our company came from outside the healthcare space. So it's EDI, it's transaction processing, it's computer science, it's the disciplines of understanding good programming and functional design. But it's also being able to, work within the system. Healthcare is very dynamic. It's very schizophrenic at times. Things happen, 5010 was a big push. ICD-10 is a big push. And, you're going from 9,000 codes to 200,000 codes. And you have codes that talk about initial turtle bite and subsequent turtle bite. And then if you provoke the turtle and he bit you, that's a third and it's just going to get crazy and crazier. And it all boils down to, that information technology mine and that data analyst that can mine through this, the chaff, right, and get the wheat. And that's going to be the pertinent data for us, or the pertinent positions open for us over the next couple of years. It's all development. It's all senior software design. And I'm not very language specific. I'll take Java. I'm more interested in the skills and the leadership capability of the person than I am the technical side. Because most everybody in our business now is technically capable.
Yeah, I think our businesses are very similar. Because, the things that I see opening up are around data analysis, data analysts. Really helps if you understand the industry and the domain. That's important. In addition to leadership, what we really look for is just that desire to learn something new all the time. We have some people, not very many because we tend to weed them out of the company, but that don't like to learn new things, and so they become stale. And so one thing we constantly look for is, it's great, you know all that, that's your table stakes, that's what got you in the door. Now can you continue to learn? And can you continue to learn new things? And can you fit within the culture? Can you work with other people? Because no one works as just an individual, within our company. It's very team oriented. And but I think having good skills gets you in the door, doesn't get you the job. Gets you the job or those extra things that I mentioned.
So when you get out of school and you get a job, you're going to get a job in one of three areas of our economy. I'm assuming you're going to be in healthcare. Well, even if you're not. Again, this is my opinion. So you're going to be on a provider side, you're going to be on a development side, or you're going to be at a consulting related firm. And so let me break that down for you. If you're on the provider side, the ability to be highly technical from a programming, storage, networking, that kind of perspective is lower. Because the provider side is about the workflow, the human transaction, and how that human transaction is used to capture necessary data that can be analyzed on the back end, can be built, can be analyzed, can be quality vetted, etc. Right? So that's workflow analysis, process improvement, lean, Six Sigma, critical thinking skills, these kinds of things.